Next, let us look at the life of Guru Padmasambhava. Where shall we begin today? Yesterday we mentioned that Guru Padmasambhava's enlightened activities in the Tibetan region faced some challenges. This was ultimately due to the collective merit of sentient beings there. On the surface, things appeared rather difficult. After that, Guru Rinpoche held the reins of his mount and suddenly departed, taking the Rulak road. He was escorted by two loyal ministers. One was called Lote Gunagong and the other was Shang Nyangtang. These two devoted ministers escorted Guru Padmasambhava to the region as far as Mangyul, which is now part of Kirong County. Some wicked ministers believed that this Tantrika had great power, which was far beyond ordinary. They thought that if they did not kill him, he would definitely return to curse the Tibetan region in the future. So they secretly sent 18 exceptionally fierce assassins. They set out on horseback, planning to kill Guru Padmasambhava in secret. When Guru Padmasambhava arrived at Mangyul Gungthang, he already foresaw the danger and warned his escorts that people might come to harm us tomorrow. The next day, when they reached the precipitous path at Dongbab, the path there was extremely treacherous and very narrow. At that very moment, these 18 assassins held their weapons, ready to assassinate Guru Rinpoche. Guru Rinpoche suddenly made a mudra toward them, and as a result they all froze like clay statues, unable to utter a single word. They were all frozen on the spot. Generally speaking, this mudra of Guru Rinpoche is called the wrathful mudra. In this wrathful mudra, the index finger points straight ahead. It is used to subdue and rebuke ghosts and spirits. The practitioner must be completely fearless. This mudra is used to rebuke and subdue ghosts, spirits, demons, and other malevolent beings. As a result, they became completely motionless, like people in a vegetative state, and were unable to speak. At the same time, Guru Rinpoche took his escorts and walked away freely, leaving them behind. He simply left them all frozen there and departed. Next, we will discuss some prophecies Guru Rinpoche gave to the Tibetan region just before his departure. When the escorts were about to return from that mountain pass, Guru Rinpoche said to them that Tibetan region's evil hordes of demons, Rākṣasas, gods, and Nagas needed to be tamed 3 times. Now there is only one left unfinished. This is truly a pity. If those wicked ministers had not disrupted the positive dependent origination, the Tibetan region might not be what it is today. If all 3 rituals could have been completed, the king of Tibet would have enjoyed a long life. The entire kingdom would have flourished. The king's lineage would become ever more powerful, and the sublime Dharma would have remained long in the world. Regrettably, however, one ritual was left unfinished at that time, and Guru Rinpoche had to leave. Furthermore, the Buddha Dharma would also appear in a place called Dajong. This was a prophecy for the future. However, a war would break out there, and the Buddha Dharma would suffer a series of damages. Those local Nagas and Gyalpo spirits have vicious intentions, and even the king's family line will not obey the law, and all will fall into anarchy. As a result, the entire Tibetan region fell into disarray. Particularly after the later propagation period, the region became divided and basically lacked a unified king. Therefore, regarding the future of the entire Tibetan region, there was indeed no centralized royal authority anymore. This was especially true during the later propagation period. During that time, there was no official king to rule over the Tibetan region. Otherwise, things would not have changed so dramatically later on. In contrast, during the early propagation period, no matter what challenges arose, the king still maintained control despite various internal changes. But in the later period, the situation truly got out of hand. At that moment, he was giving the escorts a handful of mustard seeds. He told them to scatter the seeds over those who had tried to kill them the day before. After saying this, he handed a handful of white mustard seeds to the escorts. Then Guru Padmasambhava continued on his way. This was the point when Guru Rinpoche departed from the Tibetan region. This is recorded in many of our historical texts, including the Pema Katang. It is also mentioned in many prayers to Guru Rinpoche. Everyone witnessed Guru Rinpoche depart. At that moment, Guru Rinpoche said, "I am going to the land of Rākṣasas in the southwest to subjugate those Rakshasa demons." The moment he finished speaking, he flew up into the sky on his horse, with his Dharma robes flapping and staff clattering. He then rose into the sky on a cloud, free and at ease. Some accounts say that he and his mount rose into the sky together, while others say that he rose into the sky while seated on his mount. At that time, Yeshe Tsogyal was likely present, though in Buddhist history there are slightly different accounts regarding this. Many Terma texts also describe Guru Rinpoche's final departure in different ways. The accounts vary somewhat. As I mentioned yesterday, some scholars hold the view that Guru Rinpoche left for the land of Rākṣasas from Gungtang Lato, but that is not the most definitive account. In fact, Guru Rinpoche left after King Trisong Detsen passed away during the reign of Mune Tsempo. That was when he actually left. At Gungtang, in order to deal with those treacherous ministers, Guru Rinpoche performed a miraculous display, making them believe that he had left. Later, he actually went to Tidro. In that area of Tidro, isn't there a huge Guru Padmasambhava cave? While staying there, he taught many Dharma essences, such as the lotus heart essence. At Samye Shimfu, Guru Padmasambhava also stayed there in secret and revealed the lotus Dharma teachings. Afterward, he gradually spread teachings throughout the Tibetan region, traveling to various places such as Kham and Amdo. He traveled there through his miraculous powers. Of course, when concealing termas in other places, he did not travel there on foot. At that time, Guru Rinpoche traveled by various miraculous means and visited a great many places. So, before a certain group of people back then, this miraculous departure was witnessed by them. Consequently, the Tibetans assert the Gungthang Pass to be the site of the Master's departure. Speaking of the Gungthang Pass, someone came to see me last year and mentioned that they plan to do some renovations on that mountain. Yet, there seems to be almost nothing up there, with only a few structures remaining. They said they were getting ready to renovate that spot. Sometimes when we think about it, for a great master like Guru Padmasambhava to have spent time in those places, it now looks as if almost nothing was left behind. For ordinary people of the world, after they depart, or wherever they have been, people usually erect a monument or something similar. So this Gangtang Lato, or the Gangtang Pass, is widely recognized by Tibetans as the exact place where Guru Padmasambhava left the Tibetan region. However, some accounts claim that the location was actually on the other side of that precipitous path at Dongbab. Moreover, this site is more likely to have been a mountain on the border of India and Tibet. Taranatha described it as on the border of India and Tibet, but geography suggests it might not be on the border of India and Tibet. It should actually be near the Tibet-Nepal border. That area is also quite close to the Indian border, but strictly speaking it is not in India, because throughout history Nepal has always been an independent country. As for India, it was ruled as a unified colony for 1 or 2 centuries. Before that, there were kingdoms such as Magadha and the 16 great states, much like ancient China. Historically, it was divided into numerous small kingdoms. Nevertheless, looking at the history of Nepal, India never truly ruled over them. Therefore, at that time, Taranatha, who authored the history of Buddhism in India, was very familiar with the border area between Tibet and India. However, we Tibetans traditionally refer to that entire Himalayan border region, including Nepal, as Indo-Tibetan. That is how we usually refer to it, though strictly speaking, it should be called the Tibet-Nepal border. But we cannot alter the text. Since the author wrote it this way, it is better for us to leave it unchanged. On their way back, the escorts scattered those white mustard seeds onto the bodies of the frozen assassins, allowing them to be able to move and talk. They had probably been frozen there for a day or two. The 2 escorts conveyed all these words of Guru Rinpoche to the Tibetan king, Trisong Detsen. The king felt deep regret. In order to listen to all the remaining teachings that Guru Rinpoche had not finished expounding, the king later specially invited Pandit Vimalamitra and Shantigarba. This probably happened later. The Tibetan king may have first received the Khandro Nyingtik from Guru Rinpoche. Later, he received the Vima Nyingtik from Vimalamitra. Our Nyingtik Yabji includes both the Khandro Nyingtik and the Vima Nyingtik. Shantigarba also transmitted certain secret mantra teachings. Later, the king invited these great masters. Following this, regarding the details of the king constructing Sami Monastery, these events are described in the supplemented version of the Testament of Ba. But the ancient documents known as the Nyingma Tantras unanimously agree that Guru Rinpoche consecrated the Arya Paloling temple and performed the ground blessing ritual at Sami Monastery. The author's meaning is that Guru Rinpoche consecrated the Arya Paloling temple, which we discussed earlier, and performed the ground blessing ritual for Sami. This is clearly reasonable. Therefore, the previously mentioned incident involving the two beautiful women who held the measuring cords during the temple construction is clearly a historical fact in the record of the Arya Paloling. That is indeed what he meant. But in reality, if we look at Arya Paloling and Sami and explain them through logical reasoning, there should be no contradiction between them. Since Sami monastery had already been consecrated, it would be illogical if Arya Paloling had not been consecrated as well. Arya Paloling was indeed consecrated. As for Sami, because in the Testament of Ba, aren't there several versions of the Testament of Ba available now? In these versions, it is not clearly stated. The entire scene of the consecration is not clearly depicted. Of course, in some later Terma teachings, including biographies of Guru Padmasambhava, and also through His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, who often recounted these events through recollection, there are descriptions of many scenes from back then involving Guru Rinpoche, King Trisong Detsen, and the consecration of Sami Monastery. In any case, the Testament of Ba records that Guru Padmasambhava stayed in central Tibet for 18 months. The supplemented version of the Testament of Ba states that Guru Padmasambhava stayed in the entire region of Tibet for 18 months. One refers to central Tibet, around Utsang, according to the supplemented Testament of Ba. However, I looked into this and couldn't find it in either the Chinese or Tibetan editions. It seems there are several versions available now. I reviewed them all but found no such mention. I'm not sure if it was present in Taranatha's copy at that time. It probably was there. Let's see if any of you have it. Here it says that there are the supplemented version and the Chinese translation available nowadays, right? But I couldn't find where it says he stayed for 18 months. In the testimony of the Lama, the number of months is not specified. There is also one called the Testimony of the King. As for the Testimony of the King, it consists primarily of ancient documents. In this text, it is mentioned that Guru Rinpoche stayed in the Drakma area around Sami for 18 months. Regarding the duration of his stay, what is recorded in various historical sources is not necessarily the same, but most accounts agree. Therefore, on this matter, we probably need to do some analysis. One account comes from a teaching given last year by Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro, based on a text we have now translated called The Heart Advice of Guru Padmasambhava. It was revealed by Nyangral Nima Ozer. As I recall, it says that Guru Rinpoche stayed in the Tibetan region for 111 years. Moreover, it explicitly says that at that time, Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal met Guru Rinpoche when she was 13 years old and became his consort. Guru Rinpoche stayed in the Tibetan region for 111 years. Later, some of our histories mention that Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal compiled many of Guru Padmasambhava's teachings and concealed them as termas. So, on the one hand, the Terma teachings say that Guru Rinpoche stayed in the Tibetan region for 111 years, and if Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal began following him at the age of 13, then she must have lived to be at least 120 years old. As for Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal, there is also some basis for this view, but on this point I remember that I once translated Dudjom Rinpoche's History of Buddhism, which we published under the title The History of Tibetan Secret Mantra Buddhism. Why was it called The History of Tibetan Secret Mantra Buddhism? Because it places a greater focus on the secret mantra tradition. That is why I deliberately gave it The History of Tibetan Secret Mantra Buddhism. It was written by the second Dudjom Rinpoche. In this text, regarding the duration of Guru Padmasambhava's stay in the Tibetan region, there is a brief explanation. The text means that accounts of Guru Padmasambhava's time in the Tibetan region vary across different traditions. They are divided into short, medium, and long periods. According to the short accounts, it was 6 to 18 months, just as mentioned here in this text. According to the medium accounts, it is given as 3 years, 6 years, or 12 years. According to the long accounts, it was 111 years. However, in this calculation, 2 seasons are counted as 1 year. In other words, if calculated this way, it would amount to 55.5 years. That was the explanation given by His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche at that time. In his analysis, he stated that when King Trisong Detsen was 21 years old, Guru Rinpoche was invited to the Tibetan region. King Trisong Detsen lived to the age of 59, and subsequently, for about 16 years, Guru Rinpoche remained in the Tibetan region. So from our own point of view, there may not be any contradiction. Regarding these different viewpoints, when it is convenient for you, you should take a look at His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche's work. I find Dudjom Rinpoche's historical account to be very well reasoned. It presents short, medium, and long versions of the timeline, but the longest version may not be the 111 years mentioned by Nyangral Nima Ozer. Otherwise, the period of time would seem a little too long. Still, we do not know for certain which historical text His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche relied upon for his calculations. If calculated in that manner, such a method of calculation should be considered reasonable. As for these historical sources, Dudjom Rinpoche was primarily a great Tertön, so he may not have been equally familiar with secular historical records. However, when we actually read the history of Tibetan secret mantra Buddhism, we find that his work is truly remarkable. Therefore, regarding the duration of Guru Rinpoche's stay in the Tibetan region, on one hand we can simply say, he was a great Mahasiddha and his deeds were inconceivable. He could manifest in any way needed to benefit sentient beings. We can use this kind of language to view it with pure perception, but on the other hand, he is after all a historical figure. He is not a mythological figure. Since he is a historical figure, we cannot simply dismiss the details as inconceivable or merely describe it as a miraculous manifestation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We cannot simply explain everything away like that, so if we understand the reasoning behind it, I think we can gain a more balanced understanding of Guru Rinpoche. After all, almost every historical figure has been described in different ways. The same applies to the Buddha himself. In any country, the lives of early historical figures were often not recorded in writing. As a result, many different accounts emerged. But when it comes to Guru Rinpoche, we should understand the more reliable accounts in this way. This will help us better understand the life of Guru Rinpoche. I hope you will also take some time to read Dudjom Rinpoche's History of Buddhism, as well as the other views, and compare them. That would probably be a more reasonable approach. All right, we will stop here for today.
Chupun Sonen Bandara Padmasambhava Bandara Padmasambhava